Patch management. As straightforward and commonplace as patch management might be, or you might expect it to be, it's still a giant security hole for many organizations, including the federal government. In fact, there was a 2015 Verizon security report that stated, and I quote, 99% of the exploited vulnerabilities had been compromised more than a year after the associated CVE was published. Now that's geek speak, but in plain English what that means is the attacks were known for more than a year. There was a fix for that attack for more than a year, and yet they still worked in 99% of the cases where they were used. In other words, if you had patched your system when the patch came out to fix this vulnerability, you wouldn't have been hit. Patching is not difficult to do, but it takes discipline and you have to actually do it. It's like eating your vegetables or doing your exercises. So, deficient patch management, I should mention too that in my own experience, I have seen systems unpatched for far more than just 1 year. In fact, the record for me personally, and I won't name where I saw it, was a system that remained unpatched for, and I kid you not, 7 years. That's a long time to go unpatched. There are a lot of vulnerabilities and a lot of exploits that came into being and were known over the period of those 7 years. So, deficient patch management has many ill effects. First of all, it leaves your systems vulnerable to well-known attacks. Hackers aren't going to take the trouble to devise new attacks if they can use one that's already known. To give you an idea of how much easier it is to take an existing attack and adapt it versus creating a new one from scratch, a recent semantic threat report showed that there were 24 so-called 0 days, that is brand new attacks, in 2014. There were, by contrast, 315 million variants unknown attacks. So which one's easier to create? So you guard against those that are easy to create. The new ones, yes, require attention, but the known attacks definitely need to be addressed. Further confirmation of this comes from the Verizon threat report, which states that, quote, a CVE being added to Metasploit is probably the single most reliable predictor of exploitation in the wild. Once again, that's geek speak. What that means is Metasploit is a penetration testing tool that it has legitimate uses to determine where an organization is vulnerable, but of course it has illegitimate uses as well. It's widely used by hackers to attack systems and exploit systems and exfiltrate data. A CVE is simply a vulnerability, and when a vulnerability becomes known, it is added to Metasploit's bag of tricks, if you will, and Metasploit can use that new vulnerability to attack a system. Done by white hat hackers or legitimate hackers, it simply exposes a vulnerability that you can fix. Done by black hat hackers, it exposes a vulnerability that they then use to their own advantage and to your detriment. So what that report says is, as soon as a CVE is added to Metasploit, you can count on hackers downloading the new version of Metasploit and using it to attack. So they're on it right away, and we've just heard that most organizations, or organizations all too often, are not on it right away and don't patch their systems or wait too long, up to a year in many cases, to patch and guard against the vulnerabilities that the hackers are already downloading and using in Metasploit or other tools. So patch management is not a new technology. It's not exciting. It's mundane, but it's mature. But the technologies to do it are mature and they're readily available. And it takes, as I said, discipline to be sure that it's carried out properly. It is a foundation for a solid security program, and as I've indicated, all too many organizations do it only sporadically or do not do it in a timely fashion. The primary target for attackers, of course, is the public-facing web server. So if you're going to patch anything, at least patch that. Start with the public-facing web box. That's the one that's most exposed. It's also the one that carries your public image the most prominently. Attackers also seek out desktops because they're large in number, and generally speaking, they have well-known operating systems. Windows is being the most common. But even if you're using other devices, or even if you're responsible for other devices, make sure they're patched as well. Whether it's a tablet, a phone, or less commonly used operating system, perhaps Linux on the desktop, make sure those are patched as well. Now, as many of you may object, saying that patch management is reactive in nature, patch management is an old technology, patch management is only dealing with known vulnerabilities. Well, as mathematicians say, patch management or patching is necessary, but indeed not sufficient. So don't think that patching will get you everywhere, but it's going to get you a lot more than you think. Think back to the numbers, the 0 days, 24 in a year, the new variants of existing exploits, 315 million. Big difference. Now, it's also true, as we've seen in the semantic threat report, that there's this phenomenon called Trojanized updates. A Trojan horse, as we all know, is the secret army that's inside the horse that's supposed to be a gift that goes into the into the Greek city, and then they pour out and attack the city. So a Trojan is simply a sneaky way of getting bad guys into the inner sanctum. So some updates, software updates, which you want to do, have now been actually infected, and this, of course, makes things that much more difficult. However, that kind of update is difficult to pull off. They're fairly rare, and you can also mitigate them with signature verification, a little bit of research, and pre-deployment testing. Test your patches before you put them out. No guarantee, but on the whole, you're better off patching than not, even if you might get hit with the occasional Trojanized update. Now, if you have adopted cloud services in any fashion, large, small, or in between, you want to make sure that you know who's responsible for the patching process. In an IaaS or infrastructure as a service situation, the vendor will likely leave the patching in your hands. For instance, you can stand up EBS instances under Amazon Web Services, and they will give you a basic version of a given operating system, but the patching and the updates are up to you, especially of any applications that you might choose to install on those. But that also includes the operating systems and the middleware. The same holds true for the same holds true for platform as a service, but in software as a service or SaaS deployments, the cloud service provider is going to provide the patches for you. Be clear though, because just because you adopt a provider doesn't mean that you've adopted a given type of service or that the responsibilities are the same across the board. For instance, Amazon in general leaves the patching to you, but if you use their RDS, or relational database service, they do the patching. The point is, you want to make sure it gets done, and you want to make sure you know who's supposed to do it. So finally, remember that patching has a very special partner, which is the vulnerability scan. You know what to patch after you do a vulnerability scan, which gives you a list of exactly which CVEs and which patches and which updates are required to secure the system that was scanned. The problem I've seen, however, unfortunately, is that many organizations will take the trouble to do the scans, but then they will not follow through on actually patching and carrying out the recommendations that come from that scan. So don't just don't just scan, patch. I'll say that again. Don't just scan, patch. Do them both. Knowing what's wrong is a necessary step, but you also have to fix what's wrong. And when it tells you exactly what to do, well, it's pretty obvious that you should go ahead and do that. So DLT offers a set of products that do patch management, and I'll just quickly enumerate some of those for you. One is Beyond Trust. One is Retina CS from Beyond Trust. And they have 3 stages of patch management. They do the vulnerability scanning, they do the patch management, and the remediation as well. This product also plays pretty well with the other Beyond Trust offerings that DLT has in the product line. Dell also has their Case appliance, that's KACE appliance, which lets you manage devices of all types, including, and has a bunch of features in addition to patch management, but we're discussing patch management here. And then SolarWinds has their patch management system, SolarWinds Patch Manager, which manages patches on your Windows system and includes seamless integration with tools such as SCCM and WSUS. It can also patch third-party applications and lets you create custom installation packages. So those are some of the key products that do patch management or related tasks.